Broadcasting from Orchard Park, New York,
and Boca Raton, Florida,
it's the Freight 360 podcast. From freight broker sales tips to sports talk, this podcast is all about helping you grow as a freight broker. We're your hosts, Nate Cross
and Benjamin Kowalski.
Let's talk freight. All right, welcome back to episode 147 of the Freight 360 podcast. Ben, I'm like 2 weeks in a row, like technical glitches here, man.
It's a new platform. Learning curve, like everything else in life.
Anyone listening has no idea what we're talking about, but that's all good. We got a great episode today on accessorial charges. Some breaking sports news, which was probably not so breaking 2 days from now when this is released, but we'll get to that in a second. Hey, we're into July. How was the 4th?
Yeah, we are. Mine was nice. Ate a lot of food, swam, went to the beach. That was about it.
Yourself? Well, I guess I didn't go to the beach, but I did go to a pool party and had family and stuff over. And I was telling you this. I went to see the Backstreet Boys with my wife, and I was really anti going to see them.
Jealous. I really wanted to go. I was going to fly up for the concert, and I couldn't make it.
Surprisingly, I still had fun because I recognize a lot of the music, and it's a concert, man. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Did a little tailgate before, and yeah, man, they're old now though. That's what's funny. So
happy wife, happy life.
Yeah, buddy. So, but hey, today's episode is going to be a good one. If you're brand new to us, you have a great episode today. It's a good educational one. Check out all the other episodes beforehand. Don't forget, too, our website, freight360.net, is a searchable library of everything we have, whether it's a blog, a YouTube video, a podcast episode, you name it. They're all in there. So keep sharing us with your friends. We get a lot of people reaching out lately that, they're newer at a company. And what I love is they're like, I've kind of been, my coworkers suggest that I listen and stuff like that. And it's good. It's good to know that we're helping spread some good knowledge. So
organic growth, man. That's awesome.
That's it. We're almost 3 years old as a podcast here now. So I don't have a whole lot on sports other than the breaking news I just saw on ESPN that Baker Mayfield is getting traded to the Panthers. So if you're a Browns fan, you may or may not like that. But I saw this a breakdown. It was last week. It was that draft class, right? Because Baker went number 1 and it ranked, I think it was like there's 5 quarterbacks, Darnold, Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and then Josh Rosen. And it kind of ranked like who was a bust and who was good. Josh Rosen was terrible. Like within a few games, I think he got yanked by the Cardinals. Lamar Jackson was like turned out to be really good, and he was like the last one picked out of the group, I think. Baker somewhere in the middle. Josh Allen, they ranked number 1. And Darnold wasn't so good. He was towards the bottom too. But it's just kind of interesting to see how these draft teams pan out. But Baker, moving on, sounds like at least. You never know these trade rumors, but it's on ESPN's homepage right now. Wimbledon, if you're into tennis, that's going on right now. I try to put on ESPN during the day in my office just for background noise, and it's just all tennis right now. And I mean, it's all right. I just never really got super into tennis.
Yeah, me neither.
But
it's a decent sport to play. I enjoyed playing it. Used to enjoy watching it.
It's a good workout, that's for sure.
Yeah.
To me, it's similar to like playing volleyball because you're just constantly running around the court, and you have fun with it. You get a good sweat on, get a good workout going, and it's not as boring as like going for a run. So
yes, my least favorite activities to do.
I used to be a big runner, and now I don't run as much. I used to run like at least 20 miles a week, and might be doing a half marathon later this year with my wife. We'll see. But I've trained for a half marathon 3 times in my life, and I still have never ran one. 2 of them, my wife backed out on, and one of them, they changed at the last minute to a 10K run. So, yeah, whatever.
I've done some 5Ks. Definitely haven't ever trained or would want to run a half or marathon. I was always of the impression, I'm like, I only kind of want to run when I'm either chasing something or being chased.
Yeah.
Soccer, I can run all afternoon, right? Like we could run for hours playing, but it's like you don't notice you're running because you're doing something else. I just can't.
Yeah. My sister's training for a triathlon or an Ironman triathlon, whatever it is, later this year. So it's like
the same too.
Full marathon, like 100 some miles bike, and then like a big like 2 and change mile swim or something like that. It's just crazy. Well, let's give a shout out to our friends over at DAT, and we'll get some knowledge packed in here with accessorials right after that.
Taking the guesswork out of freight with DAT. The DAT Load Board Network is the largest on-demand freight marketplace in North America, connecting freight brokers with available capacity on any lane. Grow your business with tools that allow you to find new business partners. Plus, you can quickly qualify and onboard new carriers. And with the industry's leading freight rate data, you can make clear and confident pricing decisions. Check out the show notes for a free month of Power, Express, or Trucker's Edge.
Absolutely. So, accessorial. So, I want to start super basic, and we'll define what does it even
accessorial?
mean. Yeah, what does it even mean? And then we'll kind of break down what some of them are, how much you can expect to pay, and what's that gray area that should constitute or not constitute paying one. Okay, so an accessorial is essentially, and if you want to break it down any further than this, feel free, Ben. I always explain it like this: it's an additional charge or pay item. So you're either going to charge your carrier a little extra for something or pay a carrier a little extra for something outside of your standard line haul rate, right? And that's basically it. And it's not, it depends on, if X, Y, or Z happens, that'll trigger, this or that accessorial charge being invoiced to the customer and or paid to the carrier. Would you describe it any different than that?
No, I'm looking up just the definition. This is the general definition of just the word accessorial, but it's contributing to or aiding an activity or process, especially a crime. I mean, if you drop the crime part, that makes sense, right? Like it's aiding the process, whatever you needed to do to get that done. Like in drayage, it's all right. I shouldn't have had to, but maybe I needed a pre-pull. It's the additional things you do to complete the shipment. So it does make literal sense.
So I want to start with full truckload since that's where the majority of folks are dipping their toes in. And the main, I've got five slash maybe six, depending on how you want to look at it, that I'll cover. Detention, TONUs, additional stops or pickups, layovers, or redelivery, which can kind of be grouped together, and then lumpers. So these are things that, let's say you're picking up in Chicago, delivering to Atlanta, and I'm just going to make up numbers here, so don't hop on me about rates, okay? Let's say it pays $2,000. If all goes well, one pick, one drop, Chicago to Atlanta, you pay $2,000 to the carrier, and it's all good. That's it. Now, where would an accessorial charge come in is, did any of those things I just mentioned, did they come into play? And then if that is the case, we can add those charges on and add those pay items to our carrier. So let's start with, let's go with TONU first, because this is truck order not used, because none of these other ones would happen if you did a TONU. Okay. Truck order not used in a nutshell. And then you and I can discuss, when is it appropriate to pay them and how much. So truck order not used is just like what it sounds like. You're paying a truck or a trucking company for hiring them, and then ending up, you didn't need to use them, right? So let's say I hire a flatbed to go pick up my load in Chicago, and then customer cancels the load on me, and I got to go back to that trucking company and say, hey, sorry, this load that you're picking up an hour from now, we canceled it, or the customer canceled it. And that is when a truck order not used would come into play. Okay. Now there's a lot of gray area here. So let me ask you this. Where do you draw the line? And we've talked about it before, but it's worth revisiting.
In regards to like when I pay a truck order not used versus when they're owed one, not.
Yeah, because let me give you context. You might have a driver that says, I want a TONU, and you're like, well, no. Why would you not pay a TONU? Or, there's some gray area too where your customer may deny paying it, but you might end up eating it as well. So what is your kind of your rule of thumb on it?
So mine is, if they are on your work and rolling toward your pickup, like they have been formally dispatched, then I pay them. So to clarify, what I mean by that is most spot loads, right, or just pretty much any load you're ever going to have, right? Your truck is not starting their week with your load. Usually they are coming off of another load, a delivery at a receiver. So if they have booked a load with me and they still haven't completed their delivery on the previous load, then I'm not paying a truck order not used because they're technically still working on the previous shipment, right?
You haven't
Now,
wasted
some
any of
people,
their time yet. Yeah.
right. And some people could make the argument, well, you still prevented the dispatcher from getting a better load by holding this guy. But the reality is like, look, he's still working on his previous engagement, previous load. He is not yet employed by me. We'll use those terms loosely, right? So that's where I draw the line. As soon as I talk to that dispatcher and I say, hey, is this guy empty? Is he, delivered clean at his last stop? Yeah, his ETA is whatever, even if it's 150 or 200 miles. If he's driving towards my pickup and my shipper or the load is canceled or for whatever reason he can't now do that load, that's when I'm going to pay the truck order not used.
Yeah. So I usually say empty and rolling. And then also, let's say there's a rare circumstance. Let's say they're starting their week on your load. Like they finished in whatever city, they do their reset. I usually have and this is loose. I would say like a 24-hour rule, right? So if you're beyond 24 hours from that load pickup, no,
Yeah.
you're not going to get a TONU.
What
And
about a
even like if
weekend?
you're
How do you do
20,
it on a
I mean, it
weekend?
depends.
What do you
But
do on a weekend? So let's say it is a Monday load, and let's say it's canceled on Saturday. You pay a truck order not used if
I
they don't
wouldn't.
know by
No,
Friday.
I wouldn't. I mean, but at the same time, but here's what I want to add in too is that customers will often, because here's the deal, like these accessorial charges, unless it's your fault and your fault only as a broker, your customer is usually responsible to pay them. So you should find out from your customer if they have a policy for paying TONUs, right? And if they cancel on Saturday for a Monday pickup, I doubt that they're going to be paying a truck order not used, right? So,
Yeah. hmm And
so
again,
I wouldn't.
a lot of that is because they should be able to find a load Monday morning, no issue, or be
Yep.
able to find one Sunday before their week starts. They really shouldn't be inconvenienced. And furthermore, they wouldn't have lost any money, right? Like they're not even working for you yet.
Yeah.
And that's also why I like that dispatching process that some companies have where like you book a truck on a load, but they do not have the directions and the address for pickup until they are done with the last load. Because
Yep.
then you have a formal process in place where if it's canceled prior to that, you never pay a truck order not used. If it is canceled after, you do. And again, something really worth emphasizing, you need to make sure you've got this buttoned up with your customer for any accessorial charges. You don't want
Yeah.
to be in a position where you're outlaying cash and you haven't agreed or don't know what your customer is going to approve for a truck order not used or layover.
Yep. Absolutely. So I would tell you common TONU amounts about $200 is what I've seen about, roughly industry standard. But again, your customer may have a scheduled amount of money for that. And there's also times too, if you run into this situation with a carrier and you're kind of in that gray area, you can always say like, hey, let me see if I can get a TONU for you, not guaranteed. And they'll often understand. It doesn't hurt to ask, right? For at least from as the carrier, because they figure, oh, if I can get a little extra money. Now, I also want to add in that accessorials in general are typically not intended for you to profit off of it all. So if a customer is going to pay $200 for a truck order not used, you should be passing that right through to your carrier for $200. Might suck because you might have lost a little bit of your time or wasted some of your time, but it's just the right thing to do. They're not really intended to be a revenue
Profit
generating
center.
slush fund or something like that.
Yeah. And I'd say that's true across the board with some exceptions. I mean, like, again, if you've got a customer that you constantly have issues with and you're constantly eating up a lot of your time, if you've decided to keep working with them, I'd say is the first thing. But the second thing is you also should have something in there for yourself, right? Like if you are dealing with constant accessorials that are taking up a lot of your time, like I have, some customers where like we profit on storage in some ways. But again, that's because of just that side of the industry and it takes a lot of time and you've got to deal with that. So if you're not making anything administrative fee wise, like you're just processing it now at a loss. And a lot of my customers do that. And that's also where a lot of our stuff comes from is like, I've literally watched what they charge, right? When one of their customers needs to change something or there's admin fees. Well, and that's because it does take up a lot of time to do some of these. Some, not at all, right? Like truck
Yeah.
order not used, you shouldn't be profiting from.
Yep.
I'm
There's
trying to
definitely
think of.
certain accessorial charges that I've seen folks that they'll take a little bit of profit on it to just to compensate themselves for the number of hours. So like for example, and this is not really an accessorial, but let's say a driver delivers a day late because they went AWOL and you couldn't find them, and you spent 8 hours trying to get a hold of them with the dispatcher and blah 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 blah, and the customer fines, let's say they fine you $300. I've seen brokers that will pass through an extra $50 or $100 so that they can at least earn a little bit for their time on that load. And again, there's no like legal rule on what's okay to do and what's not. It's just you just gotta be realistic. But if you're just doing a quick TONU, I mean, you're really shouldn't be making money.
No. Let me ask you this: like transloading, when you run into a shipment where you've got to do something like that, right? Where you've got to find a cross stock and negotiate all that. Like, I don't know if is that considered an accessorial?
I mean, you could probably group it into that category of. I don't know. I mean, no, probably not, because in that case, your customer's not paying any more money, right?
No, but I mean, in some of the situations, I mean, I guess like when you run into a scenario where like whatever, there's an issue with the receiver, you can't get it off, you've got to transload it. I mean, like I've had to do that for customers.
If it's a customer issue, then yeah, you could probably say it's an accessorial. Like I've had situations where the customer gave the wrong delivery address, and they're like, "Oh, it's actually this other warehouse across town," and now you've got to hire another local carrier to come move it over there. But like if a truck breaks down and they can't they can't repower with one of their own power units, and you're
not billing your customer, that's your issue. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but
between the broker and the carrier,
I've seen people that they will. They're going to change their pay to rate for the original carrier. Then now they've got to factor in cross stocking fees and paying a new carrier. And I have seen people where they've worked it out where they just took a huge loss as the broker. But I've also seen them work it out where they break even, and then even when they make a little extra profit for doing the work to get it done. So it depends. It all depends. So that's truck order not used. That's a highly debated one I've seen amongst carriers. They're like, well, you wasted my time. And it's like, well, no, I didn't, because you were supposed to pick up tomorrow and you haven't even delivered your original load yet. So
yeah.
All right, let's talk detention. So detention is, let's say you get to a location and you have to wait an exorbitant amount of hours. You being a carrier, right? A carrier gets to a pickup location and they expect to be loaded within a couple hours. The next thing you know, they're there for 5 or 6 hours. Okay. This is where a situation where detention would come in. Like think about, detention, like you got in trouble, you had to wait after school for an extra 2 hours because you're bad, right? You're in detention. So there's typically a policy at most facilities, and it's kind of an industry standard, that you're willing to have up to 2 free hours of unpaid detention, right? Does that sound? Yeah. Would you agree with me on that?
That's pretty much across the board.
Yeah. So 2 hours, right? So if they have to wait 2 hours, they understand that's kind of part of the job is, hey, if I don't get loaded quickly or whatever, 2 hours. And then after that, sure, then I'm going to ask for detention. And detention is another one of those accessorials where your customer is typically going to have some kind of a schedule of rates. They're going to say like, nothing for the first 2 hours and $50 an hour after that, or something like that, right? Have you seen anything vary off of that? Like any variance from that too much?
No, I mean, the only thing is like you'll see a little bit in drayage where carriers will try to charge detention for things that aren't industry standard. I don't really see any variance of that in full truckload. Where you'll see it, where I always get into an issue with it in drayage, is that like carriers will want to charge detention at the rail terminals or the port terminals, right? The reality is like that's not an industry charge and nobody pays that. Again, because it's just part of the job. If you want to run a business where you are going in and out of a terminal, like if the terminal's congested, like that's part of your business. If you don't want to do that, go drive full truckload. Like that's just part of it. You can't like bill back, and there's also no way to verify it. And I've never, ever seen a customer ever pay those. Now, what you'll see though, is when it gets really bad, and it was a really good example during the pandemic, like they were getting congestion fees, like, and maybe an extra 150 a load. But if you don't pay attention, I've definitely seen carriers that have tried to, and I've seen brokers pay it and then tried to bill a customer back. And the customer's like, well, I'm not going to pay for the fact this guy sat at the terminal for 3 hours. Like, Like, that's not our fault. That's the terminal's issue. Like, and there isn't any way to bill for it, but carriers will also try to get it there and call it detention, but it's really not.
And this is why it's really important too. If you have a customer that you know that they have a highly congested facility for pickups or deliveries, and detention is not an uncommon thing, have it clearly spelled out in your rate confirmation to your carrier. Have the conversation with them because they may need to have check-in and out times
I always ask that. I'd say
to prove, right? So
yeah,
if they're going in
without a
for a gate,
doubt. Mm-hmm.
yep. So
Signed, you have the BOL, have a pen, make sure that the shipper or the receiver has your check-in, has your checkout time, because that's your proof. That's what you're going to send right back to your customer to get reimbursed for the same amount of money.
yep, exactly. Detention, definitely not a profit producing center for you as a broker. You're literally just administratively handling it. Next one up I got is additional stops. This could be additional pickups, deliveries. So there's not really a rule on this. I'm a huge fan of all-in rates. So if you have a one pick 4-drop load, for example, let's say it's some kind of produce. It's picking up at a produce distributor or produce, whatever, and it's dropping at 3 or 4 spots along the way. You're going to have 4 pallets go here and 6 pallets go here, and yada yada. It's very clean to just have an all-in rate for your carrier and to your customer and just keep it as is. But I've seen brokers that they have itemized their rate confirmation to carriers to show them like you're getting paid an extra $50 for every single additional stop outside of our one pick one drop. So if it's one pick 4 drop, so there's an extra 3 stops in there. They're breaking down $50 3 different times, showing extra stop on there. And that's fine, whatever, if you want to do that. Now, where it could be different and you would add it on after the fact is if your customer's like, well, hey, they're already rolling down the road. They're already loaded up. And after the fact, we actually have to drop this at 2 different locations, right? Which means for the driver, when they agreed originally, they didn't agree to 2 stops because that's more time for them to have to worry about unloading, right?
Well, even think
and
about that too.
A different location.
And that's why it's so much harder to cover a multi-pick load over a one pick one drop, right? Because when you run the miles, if you think about it from a driver's point of view, is it really worth only $50 to have to drive to another location, check in? And again, on average, you're going to sit there for 2 hours for free. So you've got to drive there, sit there for 2 hours, then get back out of there. I mean, like, I don't think anybody think that's really worth only $50. But again, those are pretty much rule of thumbs, and you've probably seen them change a lot. Got a lot higher last year, and they're probably coming down quite a bit now. You're probably able to make a lot more money on those loads than you were 5 months ago. I'd be willing to bet.
I would agree with you. So that's your additional stop. Layover and redelivery. So we're saying, the drivers, maybe they got there towards the end of the work shift, or either way, they got to stay overnight. Okay. And this is where it gets, there's like back and forth. I've seen way too many instances of back and forth on this because drivers like, well, I had to stay over and redeliver the next morning. And then it's like, well, because you got there late after you missed your appointment. And
that's the important piece.
Yeah.
That right there, right? Like, why is it caused in the first place? And I mean, if they had a hard appointment right at 3 p.m. and then they get there till 4:30 and now they have to lay over, that's not on you. That's not on the broker, and it's not on the customer either, to be honest.
It's not. You're right. So I think those are the ones where documentation is huge because, like you said, if let's say they have a hard appointment time at 3, they got there at 4:30, and the customer's like basically you're the back of the line. If we get to you, great.
If not,
we'll do it tomorrow morning type thing. But at the end of the day, the responsibility there, whoever's at fault or caused it, is who should be responsible for it. So like if the driver got there late and missed their appointment, well, now instead of a layover, you're looking at potentially deducting pay from them instead of adding pay to them, right? So it's really important to document this stuff, understand how strict are these appointment times? You know what I mean? That's going to be really big.
And you're right, because it's a big swing. Like if let's say you sent the wrong rate con, let's say the rate con to the driver went out that it was, first come, first serve until 4, but it was really a 3 o'clock appointment and there was just an error there, right? And the driver shows up, late for his appointment, but in line with your rate con. Now you do owe that driver and you are going to pay the layover, even though it's the same scenario. It just wasn't documented accurately, right? And
And
these are
you
the
might take a
things,
hit from your customer.
and you're going to get a hit from your customer. Exactly. And that's where, like, when we say like details matter, or like when we're working with somebody and they go like, oh, I'm spending so many time with these issues, a lot of issues, and again, not everyone, obviously, but like a lot of issues can be solved just by having accurate information in the first place and making sure, like you said, that's conveyed to the driver. They're aware, the customer knows, and all three parties are on the same page.
Yeah, and I've seen like layover. Again, it depends a lot, but I've seen upwards of $500 for layover for
Yeah,
an
and it also
overnight.
depends on the piece of equipment. Like I had an RGN 2 weeks ago delivering to the port from Ohio, and the guy was laid over, and it was break bulk shipment, so he couldn't do anything with it. He was genuinely stuck, and like RGNs are at a pretty premium over. I think
Yeah.
we paid this guy like 850 for his layover that day to the next
For
day.
how much?
Like 850 for the
Wow.
layover that
Yeah.
day. He wanted a
Yeah,
thousand. We
that's
got
good
it down to
specialized
like
equipment.
got it down
That's
to
it.
like 800. And again, same thing. We told the customer ahead of time, like the customer was at fault in the scenario. They didn't have the delivery appointment confirmed. They told us it was. They didn't confirm it with the port on their end. And the customer had to pay the bill. And that was a scenario where I added a little bit of margin on it, but it was mostly because it took up hours of my morning that day. Like it was literally between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. That was all I was working on, trying to get
Yep.
this guy into the port. And then he had to lay over for a full day. Like, so he lost all of Monday and then to Tuesday. And I'm like, can't really argue with the guy. He makes
Yeah.
$1,000 a day on that. And it wasn't his fault. He did everything we asked him.
Yep. And yeah, that's a great example right there of something outside of the norm. Last full truckload one I'll hit on is lumper. So if you're new to brokerage, you may have never heard what a lumper is, and it's fine. But this is a good example or a good time to learn it, because you may have a customer that lumpers are going to be involved. So a lumper is when a third party, it's essentially like an unloading or a loading fee. So let's say, I see them a lot of times with produce and like potatoes, onions, mushrooms. I've seen it on all different kinds of stuff. But basically what will happen is a driver goes to a distribution center, we'll say, and there's, the driver's not the one loading or unloading, and it's not the DC that's loading or unloading, but there's actually a crew of third party contractors that are there, and they're basically just like gig workers,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll get paid to unload or load that single truck, and every single truck is a separate payment.
Yep.
And I've seen them range from like $80. I've seen them like to $200. It really all depends on what they're loading and unloading and how complex it is. And these guys want to get paid on the spot, they want their lumper money right then and right there because they're a gig worker, right?
Yep. This is
So
very similar to escorts at ports too, where it's a third party company. You're paying them cash or a calm check. Oftentimes, the driver's handing them cash to just be escorted into the facility for one time only. Then they bail.
yeah, exactly. So then you have to think, well, how are we going to pay this, and how does the actual transfer of funds happen? So you have a good point. They might be paying cash. So your customer will usually have, if there's a lumper required at one of their facilities, they'll tell you what it pays. So the way that we handle it as a broker is, I would say most will give you like two options. One, have the driver pay it and get a receipt, and then they could send that receipt in, and they'll get reimbursed in when they get their actual line haul pay. So like, we would get it approved from the customer along with our regular rate, and then we'd pay the line haul plus the lumper. The other option too I've seen, and we do it at Pierce, is do it as an advance, right? Just like you do a fuel advance, you could do a lumper advance. There are usually a lot less money. Like I said, it could be $100, something like that, instead of 500 or 1,000 for fuel. But if the driver doesn't feel comfortable handing over cash and getting a receipt and expecting reimbursement, he may say, I want an advance. So that way he doesn't have to worry about reimbursement himself. So
You have a customer that provides those lumper receipts every time they tender it. Like it's with the tender, and it's the driver just fills it out, hands them cash, and submits it, and then we add it, and then it's a separate classified. So then when my customer pays the bill, they knew where that money went and what it was for.
yep. So they can allocate like their line haul
Mm-hmm.
pay, and then their loading, unloading fee pays, and all that good stuff. So those are your main ones. Is there any other full truckload accessorials that you run into? Or you've
Um,
seen that happen
just
often?
looking at layovers, redeliveries. We talked about additional stops. No, not. I mean, not off the top of my head. I think we pretty much covered all of them.
Here's what you can do too. If you work at a larger company that has a robust TMS, or I mean, if you just use an off the shelf TMS, if you go to like your pay items or like your invoice items, there's probably like 20 different things listed that you
Yeah,
can
here's a
break
couple
down on your
more.
invoice or on your rate confirmation, and a lot of them
So
are accessorials.
yeah, so Deadhead. I mean, I've paid Deadhead as an accessorial, but it's on the front end usually. But sometimes that comes up where you've got additional mileage, unexpected. Tolls is another accessorial. Definitely, if you're going to New York City, you're paying a lot of tolls.
Permits,
Permits, yeah. So overweight, over length permits,
escort
pilot
vehicles.
escort vehicles, pilot cars, both the same thing. Overweight fees, OW. Let's see, border crossing. I've never really seen that one, but I guess that's definitely one. It seems like one. Um, Stop off storage. Some of these I've not seen before. After hour deliveries. I mean, I guess that would come into play if you've got a customer that needs. But I mean, I usually just end up with a higher rate if I've got somebody that needs to deliver in the
I
middle of
was
the
gonna
night.
say you can, if you can predict a lot of these, you can build them into your
Yeah.
all-in line haul rate, your all-in rate, I should say. Well, I'm gonna shift gears to LTL here just for a brief few minutes here. So accessorials in LTL are a little bit different because they can be predicted beforehand, but they're still charged. Essentially, I mean, they're not really charged separate, but so like if you, let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say I run an LTL rate through one of my LTL providers, and I'll use the same lane. I'm taking 2 pallets from Chicago to Atlanta, and I select, an LTL carrier, and it's, I don't know, $300. Okay. Now that's assuming that it's a very simple standard pallet going from a dock to another dock, right? Now, where you have to have accessorials is they're going to charge extra if, let's say, there's no dock, and the truck has to have a lift gate on the back of it, or if that has to be delivered, it has to be brought off the lift gate and delivered inside to a school, or like maybe it has to go onto a military installation. LTL delivers to residential places sometimes. I've seen people that order like parts for their cars. If it's like like a fender or something like that, it might get shipped on a pallet through an LTL company instead of your regular UPS or FedEx. And that driver pulls up, goes down a lift gate, takes a pallet jack, and pulls it up right to that person's house and drops it off. Whenever you have anything outside of the ordinary dock to dock situation in LTL, you're going to see an accessorial charge added on, and they're usually pretty standard. It's like $25 for each accessorial charge. But those are some of the big ones. And then after the fact, you might see like a reweigh or a reclass, which I don't really know that I'd consider those accessorials. They're just kind of additional charges based on errors in the estimated weight when it was booked and quoted, or the what we thought was the right freight classification when it wasn't. But those are some of the ones that you'll see. So yeah, it's like residential delivery. I've seen was like apartment delivery where they had to go in and up an elevator and deliver it to someone like that.
Mm-hmm.
Military base, school, um, yeah, trade show. They add like a little bit extra money on there, but you can usually tell when you're booking an LTL shipment, it'll ask you what accessorials, and it'll say like liftgate required. All those other ones that I just named off, you'll see them right in there, but that's built into your quote ahead of time. Where you will run into issues is if, let's say, the customer didn't tell you that they didn't have a dock. Driver goes there. They don't have a lift gate, right?
And there's no dock.
And there's no dock. And they're like, now we have to go send one of our liftgate trucks out there later in the day. You might see an accessorial plus another fee added on
Redelivery.
there. So,
Yep.
yep. So those are your accessorials. Do you want to highlight some of the drayage ones? I know you hit on the escort one.
I'll just kind of rattle them off. So you've got I'll go from most frequent to the most infrequent. Most frequent you'll probably see is a pre-pull, which means you are pulling the container out before you are delivering it. So it's usually done when you can't get a reservation to turn a container in or to be able to gate it into a port. So you pull it back to your yard, and then you get the second most often accessorial charge, which is yard storage. So I'd say pretty standard is about 50 to 75 bucks, depending on where you're at in the country. Pre-pools are usually about 150 bucks. They really don't vary much from that at all. And the other thing with drayage is most of these rates don't vary often because they're not going over long miles. It's very local. It's all within usually 150 miles and in. So you got pre-pull, yard storage. You have chassis splits. A chassis split was when a driver has to go to a different location to get a chassis than to get the actual container. So those are usually like 50 or 75. You've got what you were just talking about, redeliveries. You take a container to a facility and they can't receive it for whatever reason. It's their fault. Driver has to take it back. So you will have sometimes a dry run charge for the first trip and then a redelivery for the second trip. So maybe it's 150. And again, this usually depends on how far they're driving. If it's just, a local move, a dry run is I drove out to that facility, it was 30 miles away and they couldn't take it. So I drove back to my yard. That's usually 150. Redeliveries are usually closer to like what the line haul would be on that dray. So if you've got a 150-mile dray and you're paying a guy 800 bucks, you usually got to pay him pretty close to the redelivery charge, maybe like 600 or 400, because he doesn't have to wait or deliver, but he did drive pretty far. So that one's a little subjective. Reefer surcharges. If you're moving a reefer, there's usually an additional fee because you have to monitor that unit and make sure it doesn't run out of gas while it's in your possession. Those are usually $50 to $75 upcharges. Lift charges to pull the containers off of your chassis. They're anywhere from 75 to 150, depending on which terminal you're at. And then demurrage charges, which are paid directly to the rail or the port, but oftentimes you'll pay it as a broker to get a unit out. So let's say in an example where your customer says, hey, I need you to get this container out. It was LFD 2 days ago. Okay, well, in order for you to get it out, somebody has to pay that storage. Oftentimes the carrier you dispatch to pull it out will pay the storage and invoice you for it, and then you invoice your customer for it. Those are the main, I think. Yeah, that's pretty much all. Those are the bulk of what you're going to see on a day-to-day basis.
Nice. Well, good stuff. There's your accessorials 101. So we got a few good questions in today's Q&A, but first, a shout out to our friends over at Lean. Lean Solutions Group is the industry leader in nearshore staffing solutions with offices down in South America, including freight broker back office operations, accounting, technology development, business development, aka sales, marketing, customer service, and many other positions. To learn more about the vast solutions that Lean has to offer your freight brokerage or agency, visit them online at www.leangroup.com. Again, that is www.leangroup.com. All right, our first question, and by the way, these all come from our online community, the Freight Brokers and Carriers Facebook group. Make sure to check that out. Our first question is, I'm already a freight broker, but I want to work for an established company. Any suggestions? It's kind of vague. When I first read it, I took it as someone's a licensed broker and no one's heard of them and they have a new MC, so they don't know what to do. But this could also apply for somebody that maybe they're a W-2 or an agent for a newer company and they just want to look for a more established company and they want suggestions. I will tell you as a suggestion, it's probably worth looking at because you see a lot more lately with a lot of newer brokers popping up, and there's bad eggs with the good eggs, right? But some carriers are hesitant to haul a load for a broker that's not been in business for very long. So that's where it may it may be of interest to you to go partner with a well-established company that has good credit with the carriers, has good reviews online, and has been around the block and not just popped up last week. Um,
Here's what
so
I would add to it. Yeah, I just want to stress. I think the bigger benefit is on the carrier side, not on the other side. Like when you get to the really large companies, yeah, there's more name recognition, I'd say, in the market. But again, you have this other problem that is usually worse, which is getting prospects into your name when you get to a very large company. And you have this trade off where, like, it's great because you can get carriers, you can get capacity, but it's very hard to get prospects in your name when you're competing with thousands of other brokers. And again, that's at the very large companies. And I think this question's phrased very well. Like it's a more established company is what you're looking for, not necessarily a much larger company, because you and I talk about this often. Like this just basically this section of the market where you've got established brokers that have been there, 20 years, but only have 30 sales reps, 40, 50, maybe at most, maybe even 20, right? And they've got a great reputation in the market. They've got great carrier bases, but you've got a huge opportunity when it comes to prospects to be able to go after. You can pretty much call your shot and go at whoever you want, and you're not stepping on someone's toes. And I think there's a really big advantage to being in that sweet spot in the market.
It is. And it's hard to find. And a lot of people, they don't find it at the first company that they go to work for. So, all right, next question. What qualifications does a freight broker need to broker hazmat? So last week we answered what does a carrier need, and now we're talking about what does a broker need. Actually, I think we did answer this in a roundabout way last week. Brokers don't really need, there's not like a certification that the DOT puts out that you've got to take as a broker. Although it is expected that anyone who handles the I forget the exact wording, but it's like the coordination of the shipment.
If you're working on the shipment, you should have gone through some hazmat training internally.
Yeah, and it's usually brief, company provided. Like your company will usually have it during your onboarding. But there's not a national. I mean, there's definitely like you can go online and pay $100 if you don't have a course for your if you don't have like a dangerous goods or hazmat course for your company, but there's not like the DOT doesn't have one where like the DOT has, or I should say like the FDA has a Food Safety Modernization Act single course that they want to see everyone that works perishable goods take. And it's like a quiz with 4 multiple choice questions and it's free. But hazmat, there's not like an industry standard for brokers. I've even heard, it depends on who you ask, but I've heard people interpret it where like the accounting person that invoices a load needs to be trained on it, right? Not just the broker or the carrier sales rep. So I don't know. I've also never seen a company get audited and get dinged for their training. Have you?
No. And I mean, I've taken a few of them. To be honest, they're not like super in depth. It's just like kind of understanding what makes up the hazmat commodities, why the classes are what they are, and what you need to be able to like kind of pay attention to in regards to like what you're looking for when you're, but to be honest, it's pretty straightforward. It's like, hey, what's the class on the shipper? You confirm it with the shipper. Okay, great. And when you're talking to your carrier, hey, this is the class. Are you guys good? Can you run this? Okay.
Yep.
It's not.
That's it. It's funny, like a lot of those, I've seen a lot of the course material too. And a lot of times it's like old pixelated pictures from like the early 90s or something like that, showing like a barrel of leaking
with an X over it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, don't do this. So, yeah, but I mean, if you're doing hazmat, a decent amount of it, and that becomes your niche, you're going to become familiar with the different hazmat classes. And at the end of the day, you're going to be a value add to your customer because you're going to be able to give them guidance on, at which class and what weight, what can be mixed together and stuff like that. But if you're not doing a whole lot of it, you're not going to really become an expert at it. So. But all right, cool. Last question. Is there a national toll pass that covers every state? No, there's not. But I think this every single time that I personally go on a road trip because it's so annoying to leave New York State with my Easy Pass. And I can't use it in Florida where you need a Sun Pass, but I can use it in, like there's like a handful of states that take Easy Pass. What is it? So the Sun Pass is just Florida, right? And then that's like for the Turnpike. Right.
I think some states there's some tri-state passes. I think maybe like PA, Ohio, and like West Virginia may be able to use one now. But again, I haven't been up there in a while, and I don't know.
Easy Pass definitely works in a bunch of states.
Yeah,
And
Easy Pass, because Easy Pass works in Pennsylvania. I'm
yeah,
pretty sure it works in Ohio, but you're right. Sun Pass down there, the one in Florida doesn't. I don't think works anywhere else.
and then like Charlotte, North Carolina, there's a lot of tolls as you drive through Charlotte, and that's a different tolling system. And a lot of them now they're like cashless, and there's no attendance. So like it's all
Florida's
pay by
now.
plate.
Yeah, Florida's all pay by plate now too. So like I don't even have a Sun Pass. I literally just, in fact, I have one on my desk right here. They literally just mail it to you like once a month or whatever, and it's just, this is what you owe. Or you can connect a credit card to it, but
Yep. So, but no, there's not. It would be pretty nice though if they had a nationwide toll. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't see that happen anytime soon.
No, you're right. You won't, because every state's DOT handles their own highways. So, yep. Well, good episode. No, there's no national tolling pass that covers every state. You got any add-ons? You got any accessorial thoughts today, Ben? Like I brought that in there?
Well, I would say this, that it is a area that I would see people doing more unethical things on this topic than most other areas in brokerage. Like, definitely see shady brokers using it as a profit center, billing their customers for this and not paying their carrier. Like, oh, I got double my margin on this, made an extra $200 and I didn't pay the TONU, right? Like, I've always been of the mind that like you should just do what's ethical, because over the long run, it will benefit you more than being an a-hole and trying to profit in the short run. Like, eventually that catches up to you. Yeah, you win a little bit in the short run or feel like you win, but you're also screwing somebody over. Most cases, it costs them money, right? And you're not paying them. And to me, I feel like, that's kind of like,
it's a really easy way to get a bad reputation and have carriers not want to haul for you. Yep.
Well, you'll see that even in our group. You'll see it in the other groups that have been around for years on Facebook. Like, you'll see the bad mouthing of the carriers to the brokers over scenarios just like this, right? Like, hey, I was there 4.5 hours and the guy just refused to pay me detention. I've been requesting it for 2 weeks and they still haven't paid me. Or, yeah, this guy forced me to have a layover and then didn't pay me anything, and I'm still trying to get somebody to approve this, right? Like, these are the things that give both sides of the industry really.
If you look up your brokerage on usually like a DAT or like Google, all the negative reviews are typically not getting a TONU or not getting detention. Something in those regards.
Yep. So. And again, CYA. Cover your ass, make sure it's documented, do the right thing. I mean, it shouldn't really be costing you any money to do the right thing. It literally shouldn't cost you anything. If you did everything you're supposed to, it's not coming out of your pocket. You're going to be able to bill your customer for it, and your carrier likely incurred an expense and should be paid. There is no reason why you should be taking money in these scenarios.
That's it.
All right, man.
Cool. Good stuff. We got anything cool coming up?
No.
I think we're definitely due for a DAT webinar and sometime coming up in the second half of this year. So
we're in discussions with them. We just got to iron out the dates. That's kind of the next big thing we've got on the agenda.
We'll get something on the books. Well, good stuff. Well, we made it to July. We're in the second half of 2022, and we're not stopping anytime soon, man. That's for sure.
Yep.
Any closing thoughts here, Mr. Kowalski?
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, go Bills. That wraps up this episode of Freight 360. Check out the show notes for links to anything that we've referenced on this episode. And make sure to visit us online at freight360.net to see our entire library of episodes, videos, blogs, and more.
And make sure to check us out on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily and weekly tips and content. And if you'd like your question answered on the show, fill out the Contact Us form on our site, and we'll see you next week.